I guess I thought that people would be getting behind a candidate that was actually viable and saying, okay, maybe we can put this aside, like our own ego aside for once and actually try to beat this guy. But no, that's actually the opposite.
Well, I mean, like people,
everyone's
like the
jumping
generic resistance people are acting like they're doing that by saying, like, I'm making a pledge to not talk badly about any candidate in the race. Did you see that?
Excuse me? This is like totally out of Veep.
No, I know. Like 2 weeks ago, it was like George Takei and all these people were spreading around this hashtag. I don't know who floated it. Probably like Share Blue or some David Brock or DNC organization of some kind. And it was like specifically when Biden was entering the race. It was like coming off, piggybacking on him. It's like, we all know what you're really saying. Just like, don't go after Joe Biden. Don't mention that he smells people's hair. Don't mention that he's fucking nuts and terrible. Like, he's the worst. He's literally like the worst possible person you can run. I mean, even like you were saying, like Hillary Clinton's more exciting than him. What are they thinking? I mean, it does seem like there's somebody who's like, yeah, just let Trump win again. Like, let's put Biden at the top. Fuck it.
I mean, should I go into my little spiel and get your reaction to all of Biden's little takes here?
Well, yeah. I mean, are we going to talk about Biden now?
Yeah, why not?
All right, let's go.
Yeah, so basically, like you said, Joe Biden is like Hillary Clinton, except worse. Worse. And I'm not just saying aesthetically, I'm saying he literally is worse. Like, his policies are actually worse. Other than the fact that he's like an old white man, you know? Like, at least Hillary Clinton was a woman, and I guess Joe Biden is a quote-unquote likable. I don't understand how that's really understood by people, or even if it's true. I just keep hearing that. Like, he's more likable. I don't know what that means. To me, he's detestable.
Yeah, who's saying that? Like, who the fuck's putting that out?
Right. It's the same people who are putting out, oh, he's going to win because he's polling. He's on top of polls. Well, guess who was on top of the polls at this point in the 2016 election? Jeb Bush.
Wow.
And we know where that went.
I mean, this is just such a kamikaze fucking crazy thing.
Yeah,
I can't believe this is what they're doing.
Yeah, no, it's insane. It is incomprehensible, Robbie. It is incomprehensible. First, let me tell you the polls. Biden is up on Bernie 33% to 25%. Right? If you're just looking at all these polls, and this is like taking the headlines across all of mainstream media, like Biden's winning because he's up on polls. If you actually look at what the polls consist of, that's when it becomes interesting. Because first of all, they're all landlines, right? Who has landlines? People who are generally older.
Uh-huh.
And also the youth demographics and like the age demographics of who's being polled. The only age demographic that Biden beats Bernie is voters over 50 years old. Voters over 65 choose Biden over Bernie, 52% to 7%. So as you get older and older, Biden gets more and more strong in polling. And voters aged 18 to 30 support Bernie over Biden, an astounding 30% lead. So that just shows you kind of how wildly off these polls are that are being shoved in our faces. And also, when did you ever hear that like someone's going to win because they're just polling high? Like, I mean, other than Hillary, I guess. You know?
Yeah, it just seems like a total
comical.
ploy.
It's so comical how we're going down a darker repeat of 2016. And everyone just has blinders on, still talking about Russia. And no one sees the avalanche that's coming full speed. So let's get into who Biden really is, because it's really bad. So, when he first announced, with that crazy video of first of all, Heather Heyer getting murdered.
I mean, I just have a lot to say about just this specifically, because it's really strange to me and just sort of really illustrates a disconnect between like the way that the left side of the spectrum is sort of presented in the media and the Democratic Party. I mean, just think about this for a second. How weird is it for Biden to launch his campaign with a video, even just talking about the murder of Heather Heyer? I mean, it just seems odd because it links to Antifa. It directly links to the idea that Trump is a white supremacist. He also, mentions the good people on both sides thing. Like, to use that as the main point of contention against Trump just seems awfully strange to me, because I feel like Joe Biden, we already know he's a racist, or he's like said racist things on camera, but why would they lean on such a horrific event to launch his campaign? And why would they also, I don't know. It just seems really strange to me. Because like the generic Democrats have always known, and they're smart enough to know that Republicans have dog whistled to racism forever. And then Democrats themselves have done that. So there is definitely this new thing where I feel like only because Trump is in office that they're trying to use what they can find as like the most salacious thing against him, where they would not have done it before in an election. Like, it is almost like one step away from saying that Trump is a Nazi. And I just find it strange that Joe Biden this would be his opening salvo coming out for his campaign. Like, is he trying to appeal to more radical minded people on the left who think Trump is a white
I have a theory
supremacist?
about this. I think that the whole announcement encapsulates why the Democrats hate Trump the most, is because he made policies that they have endorsed for decades and that they stand behind 100%. He made them unpalatable, and he made it like more in your face. The kind of emerging threat of like fascism and neo-Nazism. We already know that Joe Biden's perfectly fine with neo-Nazism rising around the world. In fact, he was instrumental in the Ukraine coup, where Nazis have a huge stronghold now in that country. In fact, his son Hunter took a board of directors position in Ukraine's top oil and gas provider when that regime fell. So we know that these people don't care about far-right insurgencies everywhere. But when it comes to like in this country, that was just like a scene that became too unhinged for them, where like Trump removed the mask a little too much, where he said there's good people on both sides. They were like, that actually went too far. The rhetoric went too far. And so he's actually appealing to liberals with that by saying, we all hated when Trump like made us all look so bad because he said there was good people on both sides. So that's where I feel like he's coming from. He's definitely not trying to appeal to radical leftists or Antifa. I think he's appealing to like the liberals who were like aghast with the fact that Trump said something so abhorrent about neo-Nazism. But I mean, he actually, everything that he's done and said beyond that has been like actually attacking the left.
Joe Biden?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems, I just don't understand the strategy of like who he's trying to appeal to. Like, is he trying to get Bernie voters? I mean, I'm almost trying to imagine if Hillary would have done a campaign ad like that, and I guess she probably would have. It seems like something that those same type of people who would have been managing Hillary's campaign would have come up with.
Yeah, because then you could just be like, look at the other guy. Like, that's what it is. He's just looking at Trump, and he's like, look at this. He's like, I'm not going to be like this.
No, and it also gives him an excuse to not have to attack Trump on like something of substance in a real way. Like for example, like immigration. Because I feel like even Joe Biden what would he say? Because like the Democrats' policies are not that different. It's just the rhetoric that's different. It's like, so if you're arguing about the rhetoric, yeah, that's one thing, but you can't really make like a campaign about how Trump's rhetoric is like too extreme.
Exactly.
It comes down to policy ultimately.
You just hit it on the head. There's no policy shift. It's just, I wouldn't say these things. Vote for me.
Pretty much. Yeah. Pretty much.
And
I mean, if Biden was in office before, if this had happened under the Obama administration, I feel like Biden wouldn't have said anything about it. I mean, I don't even know if Obama would have. If like a Heather Heyer type incident happened, just at a random street protest before.
Right.
It's like, because we're in this cultural moment where they're trying to think of any ammunition, against Trump that they could possibly think of, that they would latch onto this. I mean, but like you just said, yeah, like what policy things could they actually use against him and seem superior?
Absolutely nothing. And I'll get into how. So when he first launched his campaign, the first fundraising event he had was in Philadelphia at the home of Comcast executive David Cohen. I'm reading from CNBC right now, which was estimated to bring in just over $500,000. Then the next fundraiser he had was in Hollywood, where he raked in $700,000, and that included all these like Hollywood tech luminaries, DreamWorks co-founder, president of CBS. So it's just like total Hillary Clinton shit, 100%, immediately. Like totally bad optics too, frankly. You know, you're running against, like it or not, someone who uses populist rhetoric and who actually has a large contingent of white voters tricked with fake populism. And if you're just immediately going down the same crazy path that Hillary did, getting like huge corporate executive donors to back your campaign and proudly, you know, like not embarrassed whatsoever. Here's what he said at this fundraising event, quote, "I promise you, if we elect a Democrat this time, I predict to you whether it's me or someone else, but I guarantee you if it's me, what's going to happen is we're going to see this country come together like it hasn't in a long time," Biden said, quote, "because people are tired. They're sick and tired of what's happening. Let's lift our heads up. Again, not a joke. Remember who the hell we are, and let's go take it back." Have you ever heard of something more uninspiring and like bland and not like, what is he even talking about?
I can hear his voice as you're saying it, and it's just like nails on a chalkboard, like wheezing, like fake, triumphant, like forced, you know, like he's just like an old guy running out of steam. I could understand, and no, it wasn't clever. It was one of Trump's worst names yet, but he called him Sleepy Biden. I mean, he literally is on video, caught on video like multiple times falling asleep in public. I use those clips in A Very Heavy Agenda. There's even clips I use in A Very Heavy Agenda where he's doing speeches where to me he seems drugged. And I don't just say that hyperbolically. Like I've said before that Marco Rubio seemed like he was on speed during all the hand comments that he made about Trump. You know, I don't know if that's true. I was mostly just joking around, but I'm actually serious. There are clips of Biden talking about Ukraine and Russia from the end of the Obama administration where he seems like he's on a sedative. Like he seems like he's about to fall asleep. It's very odd. And also his plastic surgery looks really, really like obvious.
Yeah, he's looking more like Nancy Pelosi every day.
Yeah, I mean, would he really have looked that bad if you just let him, you know, not gotten a facelift like that? Like, I don't think so.
And let's get that out of the way. The fact that he has, you know, decades of like, I guess, swearing in. Why? Because he was like the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I don't know why he was swearing in people, but like all of those clips that people have compiled, very disturbing montages of him, you know, rubbing little girls' faces, kissing them right on the ear, literally touching the like chest of a little tiny girl. He like pats her boobs.
Yeah.
And the tone deafness of his posturing about it, like the fact that, you know, people accused him of touching them inappropriately, not just children on video that you can watch yourself, but also these women who came out and really accused him of pretty much the same thing Al Franken was accused of. And instead of resigning like Al Franken did, he just mocked it. You know, at one of his first campaign events, he was just like, "Trust me, guys, she gave me permission to touch her this time."
Yeah, that was,
I mean, how nuts. Insane are you?
Well, he did it to a child. Yeah, no, he was like a little boy. He like said he made that joke to a crowd after he like walked a little boy out with him on stage. I don't even remember what kind of event it was. Elementary school student.
Dude, how is this real?
Do you remember how during the campaign too, like when Trump was running for, or not even when Trump was running for office, I think it was when he already became president, Joe Biden like made several remarks about how he's going to take Trump to like the back of the gymnasium and like beat him up or something. You remember that?
Oh no.
He said, if I was a young man, I would take Trump to the side of the woodshed and teach him a thing or two or something. Like he would say weird shit like that occasionally.
I would take him to the woodshed if I was a young strapping man in the late 1800s. Like, what is he talking about?
Really odd.
My God. Not to mention the Anita Hill thing. He even says to this day, he's like, "I didn't hurt Anita Hill." He was like, "I'm sorry that she was hurt." So as he was the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, apparently he's the one who blocked, you know, Anita Hill was testifying against Clarence Thomas, kind of exactly the same as Kavanaugh and Blasey Ford. Blasey Ford was testifying about how Kavanaugh tried to rape her. And Joe Biden was the guy who was like, made the decision to not call the witnesses. And so he actually blocked witnesses that corroborated Anita Hill's testimony. And so he essentially got Clarence Thomas passed through the Supreme Court. And instead of apologizing to her, even after the Me Too stuff, and probably when he knew he was going to run, he didn't even try to reach out to her or apologize for this. And instead just like made this kind of cursory attempt to just be like, yeah, I'm sorry that she was hurt. I'm sorry that she felt attacked by people who used that to like attack her, but I had nothing to do with that. Speaking of just like women's rights and stuff, here in 2019, we need someone who is unabashed. You know, Bernie Sanders just tweeted the other day that abortion is a constitutional right. Sound the applause. That is exactly the kind of mentality that we need to be having right now. You know, I mean, how many decades after Roe v. Wade, there's so many states that have already made abortion pretty much nullified. And then we have this crazy Alabama abortion bill that bans abortion effectively after 6 weeks of pregnancy, which really just means your period is 2 weeks late. No exceptions for rape or incest. And this is the effective outcome of having all these crazy evangelical judges that Trump has appointed all across the state legislatures that are going to be in these cabinet positions for decades. And this is all because of the Democrats just allowing this all to happen. They're not standing up for any of this. In fact, we don't even hear the media talking about all these judges who literally believe in the Bible, who are like appointed by the Federalist Society. So anyway, where's Joe Biden's stance on abortion? Well, in 1974, and yes, you can argue that this was a long time ago. The problem is this was when Roe v. Wade was passed. This was like at the height of, you know, the civil rights movement, women's rights. A lot of things were moving and shaking. And where was Joe Biden at that time? He was actually saying Roe v. Wade went too far. He gave a candid interview to the Washingtonian. At the time, he was actually basically like a self-avowed conservative. Does that sound familiar? It's like all these people just blow in the wind. He was a conservative. I guess he was still Democrat by name, but like, come on, let's face it. He was always like basically a Republican. Among many topics covered in this interview is his views on abortion in general, Roe v. Wade specifically. He says, of the court decision that happened 2 years prior in 1972, Biden say it went too far. He said, I don't like the Supreme Court decision on abortion. I think it went too far. Ready for this? I don't think that a woman has the sole right to say what should happen to her body.
Wow,
You
that's
kidding
interesting.
me?
So
Yeah,
back then
and-
there
and-
was like a position that like the man and the woman had to make the decision together. That was the
Dude.
only way it would be legal.
And if people are listening to this thinking, okay, you're being unfair, that was a long time ago. Well, guess what? Last year, Joe Biden got paid $200,000. Let me repeat that. Joe Biden got paid last year $200,000 to campaign for an anti-abortion Republican in Michigan named Fred Upton, and he fucking won. He won in part because of Joe Biden's glowing endorsement and like very active campaigning for this guy. So he doesn't care about a woman's right to choose. He hasn't learned, even though it was 60 years ago. He clearly doesn't care. Otherwise, he would be up in arms about all of these judges, about the Alabama abortion bill, and about Kavanaugh, who basically is in there to overthrow Roe v. Wade. It's unbelievable. And let's move on. Let's move on to his stance on single payer healthcare. Here he is clearly in the race to try to beat Bernie, right? Bernie has extremely lucid, clear positions on single payer healthcare, on climate change, on canceling student debt, any issue, you name it. And he has a really comprehensive policy prescription for that. That is absolutely progressive as hell. Joe Biden has literally no policy ever. People are asking him at these events and he has nothing to say. In one event answer, he was like, oh, I'm rained out. I'll get back to you on this one. Asking about climate change or something. I mean, you would think that when you jump in the race, you have at least canned answers for the main policies that Bernie is touting, right? He doesn't even care, just like Hillary. They are not even trying. On one thing, he said, the vast majority of people are satisfied with their own healthcare system today. That was his answer about like, are you going to support single payer? That was his answer. Well, the vast majority of people are satisfied. Another answer when someone was like, what do you say about single payer? You know, all these candidates are running on single payer being their issue. What is your response to that? And he just I've never heard a more rambly, nonsensical answer. He just like kind of rambled around and then he was like, well, let's not let private insurers off the hook. What are you talking about, Joe? And this is all about, we want to work together with Republicans, just like Hillary, trying to appeal to the moderate Republican or actually just straight up Republican vote. He actually thinks that he can get in there and steal votes from Trump. They, again, abandon the left, abandon all the Bernie people. They're just going straight for Republican votes. He says once President Trump's out of office, he was like, Republicans will have an epiphany because I will win. You know, once he wins and Trump's out, Republicans are going to all of a sudden want to work with Democrats. Is that honestly what these people think?
Holy shit.
This is what he's saying here. So let's move on to climate change. He says that he wants a middle ground approach. You know, here this comes on the heels of this crazy report that says like millions of species are on the verge of dying off from cataclysmic climate change, completely changing the entire world as we know it. What is his response? We want a middle ground. We want to work with Republicans on this. Otherwise, nothing will get done. He says he hopes to appeal to both environmentalists, Robbie, and his blue-collar voters who elected Donald Trump, carving out a middle ground approach that will likely face heavy resistance from green activists. I'm reading from Reuters. And he basically says this is all he wants to do. He just wants to roll back the rollbacks that Trump did. So I guess Trump gets in and rolled back like 70 Obama era, very milquetoast climate rules and initiatives. He's just going to reinstate those because we know those went far enough. And compare this to half of the field of Democratic contenders, including Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, Beto O'Rourke, Cory Booker, Jay Inslee. I don't even know who the hell that is. Pete Buttigieg. They have all backed the Green New Deal. And many of them have also called for a moratorium on drilling. That is incredible to me that like he is actually running to the extreme right of those people. All of those people. Stunning, isn't it? Stunning. And here I'm just going to keep going with this. It's really shocking, Robbie, because let's face it. I mean, Obama picked Biden specifically to pander to Republicans. He's being rolled out to lead us through the slow, painful repeat of 2016, and they don't even have to try because Americans are this deeply brainwashed. I mean, they think that Bernie's radical. Bernie's just calling for the policies that FDR did 100 years ago. That can only be considered radical in a country that's steeped so far in historical ignorance. They don't understand that every last vestige of democratic institutions were eroded by the corporate state a long time ago. Like, how could we even accept this attempt to do this to us again? And let me just prove that point, Robbie. He's basically just floating on the popularity of Obama still, thinking that that's going to get him in the White House. Well, let's go back to the 2008 campaign of what Biden actually said to Obama and in front of Obama on these debate stages. This is really shocking. I don't know if you've seen this. Pretty much.
Wait, can I just say really quick before you go into that? I just was realizing while you were talking that Trump has a bigger advantage. You know, everybody's like, oh, his policies have shaped out and no one's going to want to like vote him back in office. He's shown his true colors. Maybe some of that is true. But I think one of the things people are ignoring here is that all of these oligarchs and these big billionaire donors and corporations that were uncertain and unsure about him before carrying out their agenda, now they understand and know that he will very much benefit them in a way that maybe they were kind of leery about before. So I think that gives Trump a huge advantage going into this election. So maybe that's part of what Joe Biden is trying to do, is he's trying to show those people that there's still a Democrat, you know, out there who can carry out that agenda as well. I don't know.
Absolutely. And I think that we're also missing the huge point that this is not about people voting for a candidate they believe in at this point. Like, a lot of politics now is the anti-politics. You vote against people that you hate. And who do people hate? Who represents the entrenched establishment? Joe Biden, dude. Hillary Clinton 2.0. The same people who hated Hillary Clinton to the point where they would actually vote for Trump because they hated her so much will do the same thing if Joe Biden is the nominee.
Of course. I mean,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, and there's even less enthusiasm for Joe Biden. It's like, at least Hillary Clinton, as bad as she was and as unenthusiastic as people who are actually progressive felt about her, there were like Democrats who were like acting and, at least pretending to be enthusiastic about her. I just don't see anything even remotely close to that with Biden. It just seems like a total kamikaze move Maybe he's a plant. Maybe like, I mean, we also have to ask the question, how many of these fucking people are running with the serious intention to win the primary? There's so many of them that there has to be a percentage of them that are just doing this for the publicity or doing this because they've been put up to it. Which one is Biden? Which category does he fall into? I just can't even see him winning the primary. I don't know. I don't understand it.
Well, wait till you hear this. And I'm reading this from the Daily Wire because, of course, right-wing media is like the only media that's really put this together, but it's absolutely true. I watched the video. On the debate stage alongside Hillary and Barack Obama in 2008, Biden bragged about spending his entire summer trying to convince black men to wear condoms.
Oh my God, that was on the debate stage with them?
He scolded the community for being,
I thought
quote,
that was like
in denial.
2002.
No, dude.
Holy shit.
In denial about AIDS. Praised Obama for getting an AIDS test. Quote, I spent last summer going through the black sections of my town, holding rallies in parks, trying to get black men to understand it's not unmanly to wear condoms.
Yikes.
Getting women to understand they can say no. Getting people in the position where testing matters. Then he says this. He says, I got tested for AIDS. I know Barack got tested for AIDS. He looks at Obama. He says, there's no shame in being tested for AIDS. And then he gestures to him. He says, it's an important thing. He said, the fact of the matter, the community is engaged in the community. They're engaged in denial. And he says, and we don't have enough leaders in the community, meaning the black community, confronting the men in the community as well as the women, letting them know there are alternatives. And then going back to 2007, Robbie, he praised Obama for being a black man who's, quote, I mean, you've got the first sort of mainstream African-American who's articulate and bright and clean and nice-looking guy. I mean, that's a storybook man. Are you fucking kidding me?
It's just insane how tone deaf and bad he is. I mean, did you hear the clip of him talking to some Indian guy at an airport about how if you walk into any 7-Eleven and Dunkin' Donuts that people working there have to have an Indian accent?
Pardon me?
Yeah. Like from like 2009 or something. Like,
I know. Well, I'm not even going to get into the crime bill. I mean, he did this monumental crime bill in 1994 that essentially put the blueprint for like the surge in mass incarceration. Stunning video of him arguing side by side with Bernie Sanders at the time, where Bernie Sanders is just like, this is disgusting and criminal. How dare you do this? And Joe Biden's arguing with him about why it's good.
oh, on the Senate floor?
Yeah, dude. And mass incarceration just skyrocketed after that. And he's proud of that. And let's just get this out of the way. His foreign policy is abominable. It's actually worse than Clinton's because he was around the Senate longer. He actually is a more rampant Zionist than her. He is completely on the same page ideologically, like a rampant imperialist, bloodthirsty interventionist. They both enthusiastically supported the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And he...
Really quick, I want to mention...
Yeah.
But do you remember how he was on the morning of 9/11 having breakfast with that Pakistani ISI general that apparently wire transferred $100,000 to Muhammad Atta?
No, I didn't
Just
know
a totally random thing I just remembered.
No, I mean, maybe now that I'm reading this, I don't know if he's worse than Clinton because, of course, she was in a higher position of power to carry out horrific policies that actually like created a failed state in Libya.
Yeah,
but
vice
I think
president's
that Biden
kind of a neutered. Yeah, it's hard to tell what what policy.
Right. So it's like I don't know what Biden's role was in Obama's foreign policy, but so it's hard to tell. But we do know that he was enthusiastically behind all of the worst foreign policy decisions of the last 2 decades. That's 100% accurate.
One thing I wanted to just say really quick on that is that when I was doing a breakdown for a Very Heavy Agenda 4, sort of putting together the outline, I tried to make a chart on how the foreign policy mindset differed in the Obama administration and like what teams there were. And there seemed to be like Team Hillary, Team Obama, and I couldn't quite tell where Biden was in the mix. And it did just, to me, it didn't seem like he was the driver of it, but he would latch on to certain things, especially like Ukraine, and really push that. But like he would never seem to be like in the driver's seat. And he just always seemed to be but a cheerleader for the things, the different foreign policy actions the administration would do. But it seemed like people like Samantha Powers, Ben Rhodes, and Hillary and some of her people, like Victoria Nuland, maybe even had more influence on the foreign policy actions of the administration, which is strange. It really is actually hard to tell what he would do if he had the power to be president. I think he would just be a total puppet. That's kind of my impression.
He would probably just let his foreign policy be completely taken over.
Exactly. Almost like a Joe Lieberman-esque kind of like hawk Democrat. I mean, that's how I remember him running in the primary against Obama, he was like the hawk Democrat running in the race.
That's why it made so much sense for Obama to pick him, because he made it like palatable for white people to vote for him, essentially.
Exactly, yeah.
Just again about Bernie, I found this clip. Well, I didn't find it. Sean King tweeted this clip of Bernie in 1990. Literally, you could cut and paste it and it would sound exactly like what he says today. And I think that's the difference when you're looking at Bernie compared to any of these other candidates. As much as I do like some of the things that Tulsi Gabbard and Elizabeth Warren say about some things, Bernie does have this like 30-year track record of fighting for the exact same things. And in this clip, and I have huge problems with Bernie. He is an imperialist. Of course I know that.
His foreign policies would require like an entire... I think if he wins the primary, I think we almost like owe it to people to do a whole podcast on how,
of course, but
how mixed.
But look, Dennis, because it's like, when did we ever have this crazy... I said something about Bernie and just how, wow, it's really cool that he has this 30-year track record of fighting for the same political message that we're trying to call for today, which is removing corporate power,
his domestic
installing
stuff.
A people's revolution. Domestic.
It's
but he even says in the clip, he says, we need a revolution. He said, I'm not going to change it. No one in Congress is going to change it. He said, what's going to change it is you guys getting in the streets, forcing all of this shit to happen. Who else says that? Of course, we're going to push him from the left on absolutely every angle. There's not one person who's saying what I want them to be saying in terms of ending the U.S. empire, other than maybe Mike Gravel. That's not the point. The point is that Bernie, for 30 years, has been saying we need like a political revolution, and Congress isn't going to bring it. No one else is saying that. Everyone else is saying, I will bring the change. That's the difference here. But yeah, of course I have problems with him. I had problems with Dennis Kucinich. I had problems with Ron Paul. But I still supported parts of their political messaging because I felt like they meant well. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, I feel like you can size up Bernie, and even though he said things that have made me cringe about like Russia and his foreign policy stuff especially, I feel like he's authentic in the regard a lot of his like domestic policy proposals. I feel that he is. And yeah, I felt that Dennis Kucinich was. I mean, I felt even though Ron Paul is really hard right on a lot of issues, I still felt that he was more authentic and coming from a place of like morality on foreign policy compared to like almost any other politician, which is weird to say. But
no, I mean, it's weird, but it's also not, because I think that at this point we have a good judge of character, and we've been through these cycles enough, this dog and pony show political system, that we understand the game by now. And there's very few people that you can really say mean well. As much as I like a couple things Elizabeth Warren says, good God, she just had the most shit take on the military, juxtaposing it with climate change. She's like basically just did this whole tweet thread about how we need to greenwash our military because climate change is going to undermine their mission, Robbie. As climate change gets worse, it's going to deter their ability to operate in the face of floods, droughts, wildfires. Wow, this is a really bad take. Woke imperialism is not going to solve climate change. Yeah, that was really bizarre. So everyone has their problems and no one's perfect. But yeah, there are certain people that I at least think would really make an impact and would try to do things. And it's just incomprehensible to me that people don't understand how necessary it is to have healthcare for all and to cancel student debt.
Yeah, and when I saw, I mean, just some Elizabeth Warren bashing, it's a little more, is when I saw her talk about that, I was like, oh, dude, she's totally trying to get Bernie's voters. It just was like so late in the game when she suggested that policy proposal about absolving student debt. So, but it'll be interesting to see how many people try, if Bernie maintained his popular position, which I think that he will, this Biden polling aside, I think that it'll be interesting to see what other candidates in the race try to like match his level of like leftism, basically, on those kind of things. So that'll be good.
Well, I think that his popularity alone has really caused, like I mentioned before, all those quote unquote progressive candidates to embrace socialized medicine. I mean, that is completely unheard of. and really like a big shift. And that's because of him. On a kind of a sad side note, I was talking to Chris Hedges. I just interviewed him in New York. And I was like, what do you think is going to happen? He said the exact same thing. He was like, there's no way in hell that they're going to allow Bernie to win the primary. And he was like, it's really sad that he's like allowing himself again to be the sheepdog, legitimizing the Democratic Party. So that's where Chris Hedges' head is at. I think that like Obrador in Mexico, the only way that this is going to happen is if like huge, massive amounts of people come out to vote. But when you're in a country where half of the voting contingent of the population doesn't vote like on purpose because they hate the political system, I don't know what's going to happen. You know, it's hard to get that enthusiasm behind anyone when you kind of foresee like where it's all going.